Hey folks, welcome back. My name is Krishna. If you're new to the channel, welcome. This time around, I'm going to share with you some techniques that you can use to create some atmospheric environments. And this environment right here, I created basically the statue, and I used the Lasso Tool to go ahead and create many of the elements that you see here. And the reason for this tutorial in specific is I was reading the comic series Bone, which I highly recommend. It's by Jeff Smith. It's an amazing graphic novel. And if you've read that series, Jeff Smith does a fantastic job with conveying light and dark. So nighttime scenes look very, very creepy. And in the original volumes, there was no color utilized in the comic. So fantastic stuff. So I wanted to share with you some digital techniques that you can use to go ahead and create some atmospheric nighttime environment shots. And we're going to go ahead and start from scratch. And just as a precursor here, I've drawn this particular structure. I've talked about techniques to go ahead and do this in previous videos, so I'm just going to skip that part. But what I am going to do is I'm just going to share with you and talk through some of the techniques that I'm using here in the hopes that it will actually help you out. So the first thing I want to do before I do anything else is I want to add some texture to this object here. I want to go ahead and create some horizontal or vertical hatch lines. And I could just go ahead and do this manually, but I want to share with you a quick technique that will save you a lot of time. What I'll do is I'll hold down the Shift key, draw one straight line. I'll hit Command J, that makes a copy. Command T, move it over a little bit to the left, hit Return, and then hold down Shift, Option, Command T to create multiple copies. And so when I have enough, I'll just merge all of those vertical lines together. And what I can do now is I'm going to make a copy of it. I'm going to move it off to the side because I want to reuse that later on. But if I only want to fill in this backwards L portion, then what I can do is I can simply use the Lasso tool, make a selection around that particular area, and then bring the selection back, hit Command J, and now I've got this nicely shaded. So let's repeat that process with this copy of the vertical hatch line. So I'll just go ahead and move this into position like so. I'll hide the layer. I'll use the magic wand tool. I'll go ahead and click to make that selection. I'll bring the vertical strips back. I'll hit Command J and then hide the original vertical line. So now I've got this really nice hatch line type effect. And what I can do now is I'm just going to go ahead and add some textures to this skull. I'll add some black fills. Maybe we'll add, just a little bit of a socket for the eyes there. And we'll throw in some dots to kind of create this effect of, this is going to be made of some kind of stone material, right? So this is adding some texture to make this thing look more visually interesting. So that's part of what I'm going to show you. Now I'm going to take all of those layers and I'm going to take all the visible layers and I'm going to merge them together. So I'm just going to organize my layers. I'll hold down Shift and select the layers. Command E merges everything. And I have two hidden layers that I'm not going to worry about. In fact, I'll just get rid of them. And now what I can do is I'm going to just turn this from blue ink to black by hitting Command U and then bringing the lightness down like so. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to make a brand new layer. I'll fill this in with black. If you want a quick keyboard shortcut in Photoshop to turn the foreground color to black, you just hit D for default and you get the black value in there. And I'll use the magic wand tool. I'll fill this outer area with black. So here's where the technique begins. What we're going to do is we're going to simply use the Lasso tool and we're going to carve out our shapes. So I'll start off by using the Lasso tool here. And if I wanted to create some type of bushes, I'll just go ahead and make a series of patterns. I'm holding down the Shift key and I'm making these little loops. I'm making multiple selections like so. And then I'll hit Command X and we can see that we have some semblance of foliage here. I can repeat that same process if I want to add like a part of a rock, make a an angular selection as follows, Command X, and then I can always add some lines like so. If I wanted to have some foreground leaves, you know, maybe just to kind of imply there's a sense of depth, Command X. Usually things that are much closer to the viewer will have a little bit more in the way of detail, so I can go ahead and do that. Maybe there's some veins on these leaves. And then periodically I can just add some small blades of grass. Again, I'm holding down the Shift key, using the Lasso tool. What it's doing is it's making very, very quick selections. And I don't have to necessarily do this throughout the entire composition, but this just provides a hint, as if light is just hitting certain areas within this composition. So this can make quick work of conveying a nighttime scene. So you can see right away I've got some grass. If I want this to look more like a rock, I can just go ahead and show one of the edges, come back in with black, and there you go. So this is a very, very quick way of getting your elements kind of like staged. So I'm not having to draw everything. I can kind of use the negative lines. Now, the Polygon Lasso tool is also really, really useful here too, because what we can do with it is we can add some structures that, you know, tend to be more, you know, rigid, right? So I'm just going to come back in here with this Polygon Lasso tool. I'll make a cut. I can imply that this is some type of face. Fill this in with black. So in other words, what I'm doing is I'm just utilizing part of the entire surface. I'm letting the eye fill in a lot of the gaps. And that's what I like about Jeff Smith's work, going back to his cartooning style and just the way he's able to convey black and white, convey, you know, elements of mood and time of day just with black and white. It's really awesome. So I've got, you know, more of these bushes here. Let's just go ahead and throw in a tree. So I don't even have to show the entire tree. I can just make a selection like so. You know, have a little branch. And maybe if I'm really being dramatic about it, what I can do is I'll come back in and fill in some of these areas here so we see that there's a little bit of overlap between the trees. I'll fill this in, maybe even have a hint of its texture. So we know that there's a tree that's lurking in the background. We don't necessarily have to see the entire tree. We're just providing a sense of that particular location. Now we can make some small, maybe stepping stones, again with the regular Lasso tool. Just going to create a series of selections like so. I'll hit Command X, come back in with my black. And you can see how quickly the mind's eye is trying to, you know, what we tend to do is when we're looking at something like this, we tend to start to, you know, try to contextualize everything that we're seeing. Maybe even there's like a hint of some grass that's kind of overlapping it, right? So in this way, I've got some evidence of vegetation. I've got some evidence of like some bushes, other things like that. And I can use the same thing now to go ahead and say, well, maybe there's a kind of a rocky structure. So I'll just come back in, again with the Lasso tool. Like so. You can always come back in with your brush to kind of just make it a little bit more nuanced. Maybe there's, you know, a set of rocks that are kind of gathered in a small pile. And so this gives us an idea that there's something behind this particular structure. Now, what looks really kind of odd so far is the structure doesn't really appear to be integrated with the rest of the background. So no problem. I'll just come back in with my Lasso tool. I'll make these almost like grass-like selections. Hit Option Delete, fills that in. Do the same thing over here. just vary up their size so they don't all look like they're exactly the same size. And now we can see that it's looking more and more, you know, like the statue or whatever is kind of inside that particular space. It doesn't feel like it's isolated. And I keep these on separate layers in case I want to modify something. I can always do so. But that's the technique. Just basically the regular lasso tool and the Polygon lasso tool. And I've talked about this in numerous videos. So if you're new to the channel, go back and watch some of those earlier videos. But it's a game changer. It can really simplify drawing environments when you're only seeing a part of the environment. And look at comics like Bone by Jeff Smith to get more inspiration. And if you found this technique to be useful, please consider giving it a thumbs up so more folks can find it. As always, thank you for subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.